Hey allihopa!
Welcome to another video.
In today's video we are going to sum up our reading year of 2020 and get into some juicy details.
At least some juicy details. How many books did you read this year?
I read 85 books. My goal was 50, which it was last year as well, and obviously a lot happened this year.
Yes.
So I had time to read more. What about you?
I didn't count exactly, but I think I read around 40 books. I didn't have a goal because it stresses me out. So I basically just read books when I felt like it. I had a long period after March where I read nothing for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was doing really well at the beginning of the year. I read like one book a week, and then March happened and I didn't read anything probably until July.
I was like the opposite. I was doing well before in the beginning of the year, and then when everything happened, I was basically by myself for like 4 months, and to not
Go crazy.
I just read a lot of books, especially audiobooks, and just kind of like try to keep myself company by having voices in my head.
Well, see, I watched movies and learned how to crochet during this time.
Each to their own. Next question. What was your least favorite book or books of the year?
My least favorite was Girls Will Be Girls by Amor O'Toole. The premise was good, and then I read it and it made me very angry and I disagreed with basically everything. The byline is dressing up, playing parts, and daring to act differently. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting, kind of like gender fluidity maybe. No, it wasn't. She does play with gender and gender presentation, but a lot of the analysis, her analysis, I disagreed with on basically every level. And every chapter was a real struggle for me. This was a book that I had started several years ago, and I forgot why I stopped reading it, and I remembered when I was reading it again. What about you?
I have 2 least favorite books of the year. Well, the thing is, I don't read to hate books.
Yes, yeah, I don't read books that I don't think I'll like.
Yeah, so one of them was Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. The premise is really interesting. It's about a girl who struggles with like OCD and like some other things, and then a childhood best friend's dad goes missing, so she kind of gonna try and, find where he is. And that sounded really interesting to me. That's not what the book is.
Oh.
That's kind of like a little bit what the book is about, but it's a lot about like in her head, obviously, which could have been interesting, but nothing really connected me to the book. It was just a drag to listen to this book because I've heard really good things about it. It was not for me. And the second book I read was The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. This was a book that was featured in a Fairy Loot edition, so I thought, I'm going to read it because it's like sold as a Slytherin romance kind of thing where they're like evil. I don't know, it was very silly. It's basically about a girl who doesn't want to get married, but then she's like, I'm going to marry the king and then murder him so I become the queen.
Classic.
Yes. And I thought this could be really good and funny, but it was just a bit messy, and obviously even though they're supposed to be evil, they're actually kind of good people. I don't know, it was just nah.
So our next question is, what was your most disappointing book or books?
I have 2 books on this list. The first is Blood and Honey, which I finished recently. This was the sequel to Serpent and Dove, which I really liked last year, so I was really looking forward to reading this, and it took me a long time to get through this book. I didn't really feel like it went anywhere, and the ending was weird and then a cliffhanger, and it feels like the middle of a series book. It didn't really get going for a long time, and then the ending just happened, and then that was it. So hopefully the next book will be better. The next book that was also one of my most anticipated books of the year was Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. It just did not hit for me at all. Like, I can see why people like this. Obviously, like, the representation is really important in this book, but it like, when I read all the 5-star reviews, I felt like, did we read the same book? and I'm so sad that I didn't like this book, because like I was looking forward to it so much, and it's just not, unfortunately. I will check out Aidan Thomas' next books. I think he's doing a Peter Pan retelling. And then 2 other books that I did not like this year, was disappointed by, was The Girls by Emma Cline, which I had heard really great things about. It's about a cult. No, it was not for me. The beginning was kind of good, but then it just kind of dragged the rest of the book. And then Only Mostly Devastated by Sofia Gonzalez, which was like sold as like a Grease modern retelling between 2 boys. It was kind of sweet, but it kind of fell flat for me. And what about you?
I only really have one other than my least favorite book of this year, and this is Love Please. I got it at a charity shop, as I always do, and I really like love poetry. I just think it's neat. You know?
Yeah.
But a lot of the poems selected in this I didn't think were about love. They were about lust. And some of them were like about sexual assault, and I was like, I don't want to read about that. I thought I was going to be reading like Shakespeare, but like I was expecting poems that I would be able to connect to even if I wasn't in love, or poems that were about how deeply you have affection for someone. And a lot of these were about possession, like men writing about how they want to have a woman. It was really bad. I did not like it at all.
I can see why.
Yeah. In the introduction, he writes, "There is no suggestion in this collection or in the entire run of English lyric poetry that brutal violence belongs anywhere near the norm of erotic experience," even though he literally included at least 2 poems that were about like rape and sexual assault. So, what? So
the next question is, what's a new author we have discovered? So what did you discover this year?
I discovered 2, well, I read a lot of collections of poetry, so I always discover a lot of different people. I did discover 2 in particular that I really liked. Billy Ray Belcourt, and from this collection, Stanley Moss. They were just poems that I really deeply connected to. There were a lot of poems in this book, actually, that I just connected to generally, but Stanley Moss's poem about your parents growing older and having to deal with the change in dynamic in your family, I thought was just really good, and I'm gonna see if I could read some more by him. And then Billy Ray Belcourt, this is a book that I got from Gaze the Word. It's a book by a person of color who is also queer, and also all of these poems are really hard-hitting, but definitely worth the read. And I look forward to seeing what else he puts out, because I will be buying it. What about you?
So I discovered one author this year that I will be checking out later, Brandon Taylor. I listened to this on an audiobook. This follows a weekend in the life of the main character, and how he basically, so he's like a person of color, and he's also queer, and he has a lot of white friends at this like kind of fancy university, and he kind of struggles with being the only like black person there, and like how that affects his life and his outlook in academia and so on. And then he kind of starts like this awkward relationship with one of his friends, and I really liked how this was written. I didn't necessarily love this book, but I really want to check out more by Brandon Taylor in the next coming years. I think he has a book coming out next year that I'm looking forward to checking out, so recommend.
The next question is, what is a or multiple genres that you've discovered this year?
Well, for me, this is kind of like a big genre, but it's non-fiction. I didn't used to read a lot of non-fiction in the past, but this year I kind of branched out a little bit and read a lot of non-fiction, both like biography and also like more informative, why we should all be anti-racist. And then I also read Becoming by Michelle Obama. So it's definitely, I want to read some more in this very big, all broad genre in the future. What about you?
Well, I didn't read that much outside of my usual genres, but I did read 84 Charing Cross Road, which is like humorous epistolary, which I'd never read any before, and basically my only real experience with epistolary is the Des Liaisons Dangereuses, which I haven't actually read, but that's like the only one that I can think of off the top of my head. And it's not humor. I just really enjoyed this. I thought it was cute and funny and heartbreaking. I think I might see if I can read more humorous epistolary. I don't know how much there is out there.
Next question is if we did any rereads this year. Did you do any rereads?
I did, several. So I reread Making Cocoa for Kingsley Amis by Wendy Cope. I really like Wendy Cope. I discovered her at university, and this is a book that I actually received as a gift while I was at university. I really like this book, and I think I recommended it to my dad, who, for some reason, we were talking about one of her poems, and I said, it's in this collection, you should read it. I don't know if he did, but I reread it. And I also didn't fully reread, but flicked through the Penguin Book of Love Poetry. As I said, I love poetry. So I kind of went back and reread the poems that I had previously marked down that I really liked, just to see whether like my taste has changed, because I read this for the first time probably 6 years ago. I still liked the poems that I added, but it was nice to like go back and kind of rediscover poems that I had liked. My final reread book was Our Numbered Days by Neil Holtburn. It's a book that I read, I think, in 2014. I think it came out in 2013. It's a chapbook, so very short, and I just kind of wanted to reread it. This was before the pandemic even started. What about you?
I reread 2 books. So the first one I reread was Six of Crows by Lee Bardugo. I was just in the mood, and I listened to this while working. It was just as good as the first time, and it's also nice to be able to kind of like, oh, and this will lead to this, and you know, kind of already know what's happening, so you don't have to pay that much attention. So yeah, I definitely want to reread Crooked Kingdom as well. It's just one of my favorite books of all time. This is a beautiful edition. And then I reread Jag kommer hem till jul, which is called The Most Wonderful Time of the Year in English by Joanna Buluri. And this I read last year during Christmas, because it's a Christmas book, obviously. And it's just like a romantic book to read at Christmas, and it was kind of sweet, and it was just as ridiculous as the first time I read it.
The next question is, what was your favorite sequel or book series?
So my favorite series and or sequels this year was, one of them was the Day of a Bard series by S.A. Chakraborty, which I read this year, the whole series, and really liked. It's just has like a good amount of political intrigue and fantasy and romance, like all wrapped into one. And the last book's just kind of all just neatly ties it all together, and it's just a very wonderful series, and I definitely look forward to reading anything by the author in the future as well. The next 2 series that I read this year was the Witchland series by Susan Dennard, which I listened to an audiobook. Really liked. I only read the 2 novels and a novella, and I'm gonna read the 3rd book soon, and then the 4th book comes out in June, I think. So looking forward to diving into it again. And then I read all of the Raven Cycle plus Call Down the Hawk this year, and on audiobook, and I really liked the audiobook. The narrator has a very particular voice, but it was just really fit with the story somehow. Absolutely loved the Raven Cycle. I didn't think I was gonna like it. I was like, oh, no, it's too silly, like, and then obviously now I'm obsessed with the series, and the next book in the Ronan series, or whatever it's called, is coming out this year, I think, as well. So I'm looking forward to that. What about you?
I don't read that many books that are in series, but I did read, as I said, 84 Charing Cross Road by Helen Hanff. And my friend who recommended this book to me told me last week that there's actually a sequel, which I didn't know. So I'm gonna have to go and find that. I think it's called The Duchess of Bloomsbury. Fact check. So yeah, this is part of a series, so I can count it here. Yeah, as I said, I mostly read poetry, which are not usually in a series.
What?
Or a sequel. I'm gonna read the sequel to this book at some point.
And now, drum roll for the final question is, what was your favorite book of the year?
As I said, I didn't write down what books I read this year, which meant that I had to go through my bookshelves and try to remember what I read. So this may not have been my absolute favorites because I can't remember, but that's how my brain works. I've got 2 books. I've got 20th Century Women's Poetry, and I've got Sigrid Sassoon's War Poems. I kind of read them at around the same time when I was getting back into reading in like July, August. They kind of helped me get back into the swing of reading. I don't know what to say really. They're just good and I enjoyed them a lot.
Well, sometimes that's it. You just enjoy them.
Yeah.
There's no reason.
Yeah, it was just good. What about you?
I have a lot of favorite books of the year. I'm sorry. It's just, I had a decent good reading year. So the first one is The Binding by Bridget Collins. I read this a bit earlier this year and I really liked it. It's not really what the synopsis says that it's about. It kind of says like, oh, it's about like how when you bind books, that's how you collect memories and how people want to like erase their memories. It's a bit like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, but like books instead. And then the main character finds one day a book with his name on it, but that's not really what happens. It's more about like the world has that as like that you can like erase your memory. And the main character goes to this bookbinder and starts to learn about bookbinding, but then things happen basically and he remembers things. So it's a bit more about like forbidden love in this time. I really enjoyed it. I think the first like half was a bit stronger than the second half. I'm going to read Bridget Collins' next book quite soon as well because I've heard some mixed things about it. The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is about a guy who finds a hidden library, kind of. It's very meandering, which I discovered that I really like. Some people have said it's kind of like a video game, but like in book form, which I can sort of see. I don't play video games myself, but I can see what they mean with it though. But I really like this book and I actually cried when I finished it. Not because I was like sad, but it was just like, oh, like I was so happy to like have experienced this book. It was really, really wonderful. And then I read The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, and this absolutely one of my favorite books of the year. It was so good and like so heartwarming, and definitely a book that I was happy to have read during this really hard year because it was just so sweet and wonderful. I want to read the next book that kind of has a similar cover by T.J. Klune, so I'm hoping that it's going to have the same feeling. I'd recommend reading this. It's just And then we have The Invisible Life of Ada LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which I absolutely loved. It was, again, a little bit meandering. It didn't have like a super strong like story, if that makes sense. It was just kind of following Addie through like 300 years of living and how that kind of affects her and how she then discovers someone who actually does remember her. And then as honorable mentions, the Saga graphic novel, which is like 9 volumes at the moment and they're all like on pause with a massive cliffhanger. I finished reading Saga this year and it was so good. It's like a saga, surprisingly, but it follows like these 2 characters who are from different like species who are at war in the galaxy. They fall in love and have a baby, which is technically not supposed to be allowed or whatever, and they're running for their lives basically, and you follow them and some other characters. Very cosmic space opera, definitely for adults. It's not like for children. It has like strong words, sex, and very vulgar things in it, but it's really good. And then I also watched all of Atla this year, Avatar The Last Airbender, and then was obsessed with it. And so I read all the graphic novels basically, and the graphic novels, especially I think volume 3, The Promise, so good. If you are looking for more Avatar content, I definitely recommend the graphic novels. They are so good, and they directly follow what happens at the end of the series. They're so good.
Another book that I really liked and that I don't have a physical copy of was Black Flamingo by Dean Asa.
Oh, yes.
Narrative poetry somehow really worked for me. I didn't think it would, because I don't normally like really long poems. I find them exhausting. It's not in verse, completely strict verse all the way through, so it makes it much easier for me to read, at least. I really enjoyed that. So what was your biggest surprise of this year?
My biggest surprise of the year was The Bird and the Blade by Megan Bannon. I bought this at Foyle's maybe a year ago or so, then realized this was like a retelling of the opera Turandot. Thank you. I was like, what's it called? I was like, something on B? No. And we watched the opera, not in real life obviously, but online, and it follows the point of view of the slave girl, I think that's her name, in the opera, and how she ends up following along the prince basically and the prince's father. It was really good, and it kind of mixes some historical accuracy, but the authors also said like she mixed in some other. It was just really good and really heartbreaking. If you know what happens in the opera, you'll know probably how this book ends, but it was still like so good and like pining and just really hit me hard when I was reading this book. Really surprised. I did not expect that from this book.
I didn't have any surprises, mostly because most of the books that I read are books that I have owned for several years. So they're kind of books that I'm vaguely familiar with. So I didn't really have any books where I was like, wow, what a book that I wasn't expecting. I did enjoy when we watched that opera though.
Yes.
We should do some more of that.
Yes. Operas are good. I like operas.
Yeah, loads of them are available for free on YouTube.
With subtitles too.
With subtitles.
I mean, I struggled watching The Magic Flute, that's this in Swedish by Ingmar Bergman, and I was like, is this in Swedish? And then I realized that it was, and I was like, oh yeah.
And
now.
I was confused because I had seen it in German before and I was like not recognizing anything. But yeah, that was good too.
Yes. Now this is an opera stand count. And what's your favorite book of this year? Did you enjoy any of the books that we read, or did you have different opinions on the books?
Tell us in the comments if there are books you thought that we missed out on this year that you think we should read soon.
And give us a like and a subscribe.
Yes.
And follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads, where we are Tess and Orlin. Hej då!
Bye!
Is it snowing?
It's snowing!
Oh my god! Oh yes! Finally.